Another month of boredom has come to a close, so let's just talk about everything I watched in April 2020, shall we? On the 5th of April, I watched Ratatouille, the Pixar film, and this has always been that Pixar film that I've always really enjoyed, but I've always found slightly overrated because I always see people say it's the most underrated Pixar film. But after watching it on the 5th of April, I now no longer consider this film overrated in any way, shape or form because it just once again reaffirmed how genius Pixar are putting premises together and conveying emotional messages. The message of this film being, no matter who you are or where you come from, don't let that stop you from following your dreams, or don't let that stop people from telling you what you want to do in life. And what a better way to illustrate that premise and that message than a rat becoming a gourmet chef in Paris. I'm telling you, Pixar, geniuses. They're just geniuses at this kind of stuff. So yeah, Ratatouille now is a 4.5 out of 5 film for me. On the 10th of April, I watched another Pixar film, A Bug's Life. Now, I had never seen this film before up until the 10th of April, which is weird considering my brothers watched this film a lot when they were younger, and they actually had Bug's Life toys. Like, they had a toy Hop figure, which I remember being kind of creepy. But anyway, never seen it before, and I quite enjoyed it. It's obviously not on the upper echelon or the top tier of Pixar films. It didn't like hit me where I live or anything like that. But it was still a fun animation with a fun premise of ants and bugs and seeing the world from their perspective and how our things to them are like much bigger. Like, they have a city made up of pizza boxes and Coke cans, and I found that stuff clever. I'm a sucker for those kind of premises that take something that we're all familiar with but just turn it into an obvious clever premise, if that kind of makes sense, like the pizza boxes being the city for the bugs. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, and the characters were fun, and yeah, it was just an overall fun animation, a fun early years Pixar animation, and I'm just glad that I finally have it watched and under my belt. So I'll give A Bug's Life a 3.5 out of 5. On the 11th of April, I rewatched Captain Fantastic, the film about Viggo Mortensen, who plays the dad, raising his kids off the grid in the woods of Washington State, I think it is. And I think this is one of the more underwatched films of the last couple of years because it's a really interesting premise of people living off the grid in the woods and stuff. I mean, right there, I'm already into it because that kind of stuff, people living off the grid, out of society, instantly interests me. And of course they have to go into society because the mum of the family dies and they want to attend the funeral, and seeing the kids react to the world that they've been kind of taught to dislike by Viggo Mortensen. It's your typical fish out of water scenario, but a very interesting and very emotional one at that, because when the kids start to discover more about the outside world and how much they don't know about it and how they're considered freaks to pretty much everyone else, and then Viggo Mortensen even starts questioning his own parental methods and is wondering, am I actually ruining my kids' lives by teaching them to hate everything that I hate? And it's some good stuff. It's a really emotional film, it's sometimes a funny film, and it's just an overall really interesting premise to sink your teeth into. I really recommend you watch Captain Fantastic if you haven't already. It's on UK Netflix now, so British people, give it a watch. It's a great film. For me, it's a 4.5 out of 5. On the 12th of April, I watched the 2019 Child's Play film. Now, I have never watched a Chucky Child's Play film in my life before this one. This is the only Chucky film I've ever seen, so bear that in mind. And in the first 20 so minutes, I was like, okay, this is kind of bad. I don't care for the dialogue. The mother-son dynamic is cliche as hell, seen a billion times before, but the more psychotic that Chucky became throughout the film, the more gradually entertaining it became, and I overall ended up having a surprisingly decent time with the film. Again, it's not perfect. Some of the dialogue's atrocious, some of the writing is really cliched and really generic, but again, it's just Chucky getting more psychotic, but he just wants to please his friend, the main kid, whose name I really cannot remember, and some of the deaths were surprisingly gory and surprisingly satisfying, like the douchebag mum's boyfriend, whose name I also can't remember. It was Shane. Shane was the guy's name. Lawnmower to the face, and his face gets ripped off his skull off screen, but still. It was beautiful because Shane was a piece of crap arsehole and I wanted him to die. So yeah, Child's Play, overall a fun time, be it slightly forgettable in terms of some of the characters, and obviously it's not a great film, but for what it was, I enjoyed it, and so did my friend. It was a fun Netflix watch, so get some friends around, have a good time with it. For me, it's a 3 out of 5. On the 13th of April, I watched 3 films, the first one being a trip down memory lane with The Wizard of Oz. Now, what more can be said about The Wizard of Oz that hasn't been already said a million times in the past 81 years? This film is just timeless. Obviously not in terms of the effects, because it being an 81-year-old film is of course going to be dated, you know, the painted backgrounds and whatnot. but I honestly did not care because it's the spirit of The Wizard of Oz that is timeless. The characters, the costumes, the music, the sets, everything about this film is just a joy to watch once again, and especially in these times where we're supposed to be staying inside and there's pandemics going on, it's just great to re-experience such a warm feeling of delightful old classic Hollywood with The Wizard of Oz. It's just an iconic, beloved film, and I, of course, am one of the many people who do love this film very, very much, so The Wizard of Oz absolutely gets a 5 out of 5. Also on the 13th of April, I watched Fractured, the Netflix film starring Sam Worthington as a dad who takes his wife and daughter to a hospital after an accident, and then the wife and daughter go missing, and then he starts to wonder if he's going crazy or are the hospital hiding something. The premise was interesting, kind of. You are curious as to what's going on in this hospital. Are they actually responsible for the mother and daughter going missing, or is Sam Worthington going crazy? Is he remembering things wrongly? And ultimately, the mystery is unfulfilling because it just is. I just didn't find it a very satisfying conclusion to the mystery. But also, this just feels like, you know when you watch a film and the characters are watching a film that's a parody of films where the dialogue's really like deliberately bad to take the mickey out of like certain dramatic cliches and stuff? That's what Fractured felt like. I felt like it was a film within a film that's a piss take of films, because some of the dialogue and some of the writing in here is truly abysmal and very atrocious. Yeah, I really did not like Fractured one bit, and it's yet another Netflix film that has a decently positive score on Rotten Tomatoes that I just completely do not get. And that's not the last time I'm going to be saying that in this video, because there is another film coming up very soon that I'm going to be saying the exact same thing for. But as for Fractured, yeah, it's a 1 out of 5. And lastly, on the 13th of April, I watched American Psycho for the first time, and ironically, coincidentally, one day before the 20th anniversary. Did not plan that one bit. And I'm going to be honest, this might be a little bit unpopular, but I thought American Psycho was decent. I enjoyed watching Christian Bale as this psychopathic guy, just going around being kind of eccentric, but also very well spoken. He was really entertaining in the film. In fact, it's probably Christian Bale's most entertaining performance that I've seen from him. He completely made the film, but I don't know, there was something about it that was missing for me. Maybe I was just looking for a deeper premise and maybe a bit more of a compelling premise. It's just him going around doing his psychopathic stuff, killing people, mainly women, and I guess him just trying to keep a lid on it, trying to make sure it doesn't spill into his professional life. I get that, but I might need to give it a rewatch, because I watched this literally right after Fractured, one right after the other, and maybe I was just so soured on the Fractured taste that it ruined American Psycho, so might have to give it a rewatch, so I guess stay tuned on my Letterboxd if I do give it a rewatch. But as for now, I'm going to give American Psycho a 3 out of 5. On the 14th of April, I watched The Post, the Steven Spielberg film with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep about the Washington Post leaking the Pentagon Papers about the Americans' involvement in the Vietnam War. And this was a mostly engaging legal drama, and it did a good job of painting journalists in a positive light to create a good ode to freedom of speech and doing what's right, whatever the ramifications. That's what got me with this film, particularly more in the second half. The first half, I was a little bit unsure about it. It was taking a little bit to really grab me, but once it grabbed me, I was pretty much engaged from that point to the rest of the film. Obviously, Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep are great in it, and yeah, I just wish it packed a bit more of a punch, but it still packed a punch nonetheless. Overall, I'll give The Post a 3.5 out of 5. Also on the 14th, I watched Tully, the Charlize Theron film that came out in 2018 about her as the mum struggling to take care of her kids, so she hires the night nanny played by Mackenzie Davis. And I understand entirely what this film was trying to say and what it was trying to do, and I appreciate the honest portrayal of parenthood, because it doesn't paint parenthood in the greatest light. Not that it paints it in a negative light, but it just shows that parenthood is difficult and it is kind of stressful for mothers especially, so I'm glad that it was honest in that regard. It's just, the film just really failed to win me over emotionally, and it failed to really connect me fully to the characters. I don't know, that's just the best I can really describe it. I understand the intentions and I respect the intentions, but for me, the film just didn't really work. So, Tully, 2.5 out of 5. On the 15th of April was a very big first time watch for me, Raiders of the Lost Ark. This month, I finally sat down, opened my Indiana Jones box set and watched all 4 of them, of course starting with Raiders of the Lost Ark, and this film was amazing. I mean, what more can be said about it? Again, it's a classic, it's a great adventure. Indiana Jones is an awesome hero. The action sequences are remarkable. The truck sequence and the plane fight sequence just before it are some of the best fight scenes and stunt work that I've ever seen in a film. And yeah, that sense of adventure, that was the feeling I was looking for the most out of this film, and I got that because I love adventure films. I love that feeling of going country to country, trying to find a treasure or a lost city. This, of course, being the Ark of the Covenant. It was pretty much everything I was hoping it would be. So yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark is, of course, a 5 out of 5 for me. Also on the 15th of April, I watched The Miseducation of Cameron Post, the 2018 film with Chloe Grace Moretz. She plays a gay girl who is forced to go to this Christian conversion camp to be corrected to being a straight person because of religious reasons. And I'm not going to lie, kind of like Tully, I understand what this film was kind of trying to say, but it was really the execution that really did it for me, because the film spends the first hour and 15 minutes of it kind of, for me, I wasn't really sure what the actual message was. Is it trying to say you should be proud of who you are, or you should convert to whatever a religion is telling you to be? Because I was really unsure, because Chloe Grace Moretz seemed unsure, and then finally at the last 15 minutes the message finally surfaces and focuses up. But by that point I was so disengaged with the story and the characters that I just didn't really care, and it felt a little bit too little too late for me. So I just spent really the first hour and 15 minutes watching Chloe Grace Moretz kind of moping around this Christian conversion camp and not sure what to do or what to feel. So I kind of felt the same way. So overall, I'll give The Miseducation of Cameron Post a 2 out of 5. And lastly, on the 15th of April, because of how much I loved Raiders of the Lost Ark, I went back and watched The Adventures of Tintin again, and I'm once again reminded of this film's greatness. It's a great adventure film, and I'm just really flabbergasted as well by the animation of this film, because next year, unbelievably and depressingly, it'll be 10 years since this film came out, and the animation is still mind-bogglingly great. It could really pass for today's animation. It was so amazing what they accomplished with the CGI of this film, and that mixed in with a really fun and enjoyable adventure with the really fun characters, Captain Haddock especially. It's just an overall great package and a great adventure film, and one of my favourite ones. So yeah, Adventures of Tintin, 4.5 out of 5. And speaking of adventure, on April 16th I moved on to the next Indiana Jones film, which is of course The Temple of Doom. Now I'm not going to lie, halfway into this film, when, you know the part where Indiana Jones is kind of getting mind controlled by the thuggies and he's about to do that ritual thing on Willie, I'm like, am I really on board with the darkness of this film? Because it's a lot darker than Raiders was. Raiders was very light, very, serialized adventure kind of feel to it. This one was like full on darkness. Not full on darkness, but a lot darker than Raiders. But I eventually grew to kind of appreciate the darkness and appreciate just the different tone that they were going for, and not trying to repeat the same steps as Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the last third of this film, pretty much the entire third act, was amazing. The entire temple escape sequences with them running across the ladders, and Indiana Jones fighting that one big thuggy in the mines, and then of course the minecart sequence followed by the bridge sequence. It was amazing stuff. And the ending as well is quite possibly my favourite Indiana Jones ending, to be honest, with all the kids reuniting with their families when they go back to that town, and that Indiana Jones theme's playing, and it's really feel good and awesome. Kind of got the chills at the end, I'm not gonna lie. Overall, I really enjoyed Temple of Doom. Some great action sequences, a really fun, solid entry into the Indiana Jones franchise, and the more I think about it, the more I like it, to be honest with you. So I'm going to give Temple of Doom a 4 out of 5. Also on the 16th of April, I did a rewatch of Straight Outta Compton. Now this is a film I've wanted to rewatch since 2015 when it came out, because I didn't really care too much for it back then. I thought it was decent, so I wanted to rewatch it, get a better opinion of it, and I did. I now really enjoy Straight Outta Compton. It's now one of my favourite musician biopics, because seeing how the NWA impacted both pop culture and the music scene was very interesting, and seeing how success really drove the group apart and sent them on different paths of disliking each other and kind of dissing each other through their songs was very, very interesting and surprisingly emotional at times. I actually kind of teared up at a couple of parts in a film about NWA with Ice Cube and Dr. Dre. It's weird, I know, but I did. Straight Outta Compton, really great biopic. I'm very glad that I gave it a rewatch, because I now really like this film a lot, and for me it's now a 4 out of 5 film. On the 17th of April, I did another rewatch, this one being The Fighter, the one with Christian Bale, Mark Wahlberg, the true story of Mickey Ward. and I went from really liking The Fighter to loving The Fighter. This is now one of my favourite boxing films, but not because of the boxing, it's because of the story of the characters, because it's a true story of Mickey Ward, like I said, and it's just a really great underdog story that is really propelled by the compelling family drama. And I just thought everyone in the film did such a great job. Christian Bale, obviously, who won the Oscar for his supporting role. So did Melissa Leo. I was with Mark Wahlberg by the end, and I was doing that, fist pump the air kind of, yeah, when you get really into it. It's really rousing. It's a rousing, inspirational story and a great family drama. Love The Fighter. It's now a 4.5 out of 5. Also on the 17th of April was the next film along in the Indiana Jones series, which is, of course, The Last Crusade. Now, like American Psycho, I do think I need to give this film a rewatch because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but something about it prevents me from loving The Last Crusade, because this is like a beloved film. Like, some people consider this to be the best Indiana Jones film, quite possibly the best adventure film ever made. And I was just like, it was pretty good. And I think the first half of it was what really kind of prevented me from loving it. There wasn't a whole bunch of adventurous energy to it for me. Like, I didn't find it the most fast-moving film, but also it just didn't really give me that sense of adventure that the first two films did, because he's surrounded by buildings and cities and whatnot. And I want to see him out there in these tropical locations. I want to see him in these underground temples and going through these booby-trap riddled places underground, trying to find hidden cities and whatnot. And you obviously get a bit of that in the second half, and a bit of that, of course, including big action set pieces as well. And I'm not saying the first half was boring because there was no action in it, and I'm not saying the first half was boring either. It's just the first half, while it was solid and enjoyable, there was something about it that wasn't clicking for me, and it was that lack of proper adventurous energy. And I think this might have been because I watched it immediately after The Fighter, so my mind was a bit all over the place. I need to stop doing that, watching films right after each other, because it might mess with the second film. That's why I need to rewatch Last Crusade, because I feel like, yeah, my mind was just askew and all over the place. But for now, I still like The Last Crusade. I still think it's a pretty good adventure film, a pretty good Indiana Jones film, but I do need to rewatch it. So a definitive opinion still pending, but for now I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. On the 18th of April was another rewatch. This one was for Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance if you want the full title. I have seen this film now about 3, maybe 4 times. I own the film on Blu-ray, and I've always really enjoyed this film and really liked the film. But after this particular viewing, I now love Birdman. I went from being a Birdman admirer to a Birdman lover. And it's just everything this film tries to do, tackling the themes of relevance and existence. Regan Thomas trying to be relevant in the world of acting, and he's trying to prove to everybody that he's actually a good actor and not just a movie star celebrity, and tackling the themes of blockbuster versus indie film. All the themes it tries to tackle, wrapped in the tone of the film, which is kind of unpredictable with a one-shot shooting style. It feels like a play itself. You're constantly following the characters. One comes into the frame and the camera follows them, then another character comes in, the camera follows them. The drum soundtrack is also really great, adding to that unpredictable kind of vibe. It is a brilliant film. It irritates me that it takes to watch 3 or 4 to appreciate films as much as I should, or as much as I do, not as I should. But yeah, Birdman is now a 5 out of 5 film for me. Also on the 18th of April, I finished the Indiana Jones watch with The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, this was the only Indiana Jones film that I had ever seen all the way through prior to watching them this month, because I'd watched this film back in 2009 when my brother had the DVD box set, and it was the only one that I watched from beginning to end for some reason. 2009 me really enjoyed this film, but 2020 me did not. I was very, very disappointed watching this film again in 2020, and it's because there was no energy to the film, because the pacing was crap, so the adventure felt kind of boring for the most part. The tension of the action sequences was practically non-existent because a lot of it was CGI heavy, and also the look of the film felt very polished and very glossy, and it just looked kind of fake, and it looked produced and not natural like the first 3 films did, so that grittiness wasn't there. Plus, some of the jokes were really bad and really poorly timed, and some of them stretched out, and it was like, just stop the joke already. And there were some moments of really stupidness, like Shia LaBeouf swinging with the stupid monkeys, and there was that part where they drive over the cliff and land on the branch that carries them down to the water, and then it flings back and slams those guys against the cliff. honestly a full-on Looney Tunes moment right there, and I just don't have any idea what they were thinking with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I'm just still baffled by it. How you have the first three Indiana Jones films, which are gritty adventures but still had a sense of fun to them, then you had this one which just feels like a cartoon at times with some really stupidness in it. Can't help but think that George Lucas was involved with that because he had issues with the script that someone else wrote, so he wrote it himself and made a stupid film that is just kind of an embarrassment to the franchise. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, very disappointing upon rewatch, so for now it's a 2 out of 5. Remember earlier when I was talking about Fractured and I said there was another film in April that I watched that got decent reviews from critics and I don't understand why? Well, that film was Before I Wake, the Mike Flanagan film, which I am shocked that Mike Flanagan directed this film. I had no idea that he did it until the end credits, and I literally audibly gasped because I was thinking to myself, there is no way that the director responsible for my favourite piece of horror entertainment, Haunting of Hill House, was responsible for this dreary, boring ass piece of snooze crap, because that's what I thought Before I Wake was. It was just, such a snooze, man. And I say that about a lot of horror films, but this one truly was a snooze because there was nothing menacing, nothing threatening in it. The monster was a joke. It looked like salad fingers. It was laughable. Jacob Tremblay was the one saving grace of this film. Had it not been for his genuinely good performance, this would have been a half-star film easily, but because he was actually good in the film and he was actually trying to give something to it, Before I Wake is a 1 out of 5. On the 20th of April, I watched Lady and the Tramp, the original 1955 version, and it was a decent animation. There was nothing about it that I thought was terribly memorable outside of obviously the iconic spaghetti sequence, but it still had some cuteness to it. There was still some charm to the characters and to the story, and I did enjoy watching it overall. It's just I didn't find it to be like a fulfilling animation per se, and I'm probably never going to watch it again, or at least I'm not going to watch it for a very, very long time. But it was still decent to watch, and I'm glad that I've got another old age Disney film under my belt, so I'll give Lady and the Tramp a 3 out of 5. Immediately after Lady and the Tramp, I watched Lady and the Tramp, the live action version. And I'm going to be honest, I don't see myself getting too excited for future live action Disney remakes based on talking animals because the personalities of the characters just does not transfer well to live action. It happened in The Lion King and the same thing happens in Lady and the Tramp. I do appreciate the fact that they used real dogs for this film and not just CGI, because that would have been super easy for them to do that. But they actually used real dogs, so I appreciate the fact that they put some effort into it, and it actually seems like they cared about the film by using real dogs. But that's part of the problem as well, because it's a real dog but with a moving mouth, so it's like a real dog and a CGI mouth, and it just kind of conflicted with each other, and it just seemed really bizarre to me. But outside of that, it's just I didn't feel any of the energy, any of the charm of the original film, and just the connection between the characters wasn't there. It came across as a bit bland at some parts. And what makes this frustrating for me is that I feel like there are some moments that actually worked better in the live action version compared to the animated version. They switch around some locations and some characters, and it actually works better for the story, I feel. It's just the film as a whole didn't do anything for me on an emotional level because the dog characters lacked any real emotions because it was live action and it didn't work in live action. That's just my opinion though, and again, I'm probably not going to look forward to future live action Disney remakes based on talking animals because of this and The Lion King. But I did enjoy The Lion King a little bit more than Lady and the Tramp, maybe because Lion King is more iconic than Lady and the Tramp, but that's just how it is. So yeah, Lady and the Tramp, the live action version, is a 2 out of 5 for me. And lastly, on the 20th of April, I did another trip down memory lane and watched Space Jam. My friend had never seen Space Jam before, and the UK Netflix had just added it, so it just felt like destiny. Not really, but we both watched it. He enjoyed it. I got another big nostalgic blast out of it because it just is a nostalgic blast for me. But it also is a really enjoyable family kids film. It doesn't really resort to juvenile humor. Michael Jordan's fun in the film. The blend of live action and animation with the Looney Tunes has always been enjoyable. The music's great. Again, nostalgia, dude. That's probably the main reason why I enjoy Space Jam, but I do not care. That's my reason for enjoying it, and I still enjoy the crap out of Space Jam. I still recognise it's not a great film, hence why my score is a 3.5 out of 5. On April 21st, I did a binge watch of season 5 of Better Call Saul, and I think this has been the best season of the show so far. I really loved season 5. One of the reasons being is that I feel like we're closer to the Breaking Bad timeline now, because Jimmy McGill is now operating under the Saul Goodman persona, and seeing him deal with clients and situations in that Saul Goodman kind of way, doing the little schemes behind the scenes, that stuff was just so enjoyable to watch. I had the biggest smile on my face, and I was, in a weird way, kind of getting giddy watching those scenes where he's being Saul Goodman, because he's just such a great, eccentric, brilliant character, and I can't wait to see more of him as Saul Goodman in season 6, and it gave me that Breaking Bad kind of vibe. And also, so did the scenes involving like Nacho and Lalo Salamanca and everything revolving around Gus and Mike Ehrmantraut. I definitely think that season 5 is the one that feels the most like Breaking Bad. Not that I necessarily wanted that, because it's Better Call Saul, it's his own series, and it does an amazing job of standing on its own and not relying on Breaking Bad and not relying on fan service. So I didn't really want Better Call Saul to always like get to the point where, okay, now I'm just watching a new Breaking Bad series, but I still was kind of hoping for a similar kind of feel to Breaking Bad, and season 5 is the closest we've got to that feeling. And the character development, the story development was just perfect for season 5. Outside of Jimmy McGill / Saul Goodman, my favourite two characters were Kim Wexler and Lalo Salamanca. Kim Wexler's storyline was really interesting, and it really does leave off in a way where you're like, what the hell's going to happen to her in season 6, because she's clearly not in Breaking Bad, so where does she end up? I'm very interested to see where that goes. But Lalo Salamanca was very entertaining as a villain. He is so charismatic and just so chill, and he always has that really weirdly endearing smile on his face in that kind of twisted kind of way. I don't know, it's just, he was so entertaining to watch. Every time he was on screen, he just owned it. And the last 3 episodes, when it all comes to a head and you get some confrontations, one in episode 9 especially, my heart was pounding out of my chest. It was one of the best scenes of the entire series. Episode 8, by the way, Bagman, one of the best episodes of Better Call Saul so far. What an amazing episode that was. What an amazing season this was. I really, really liked season 5 of Better Call Saul a lot. Well, actually, no, I loved season 5 of Better Call Saul. Like I said, best season so far, the best character development, the best story progression. I was the most engaged with season 5 compared to all the other seasons. Not that I wasn't for all the other seasons, it's just season 5 has just done it the best so far. And it leaves off in a way where season 6 is going to be an extremely interesting ride, and I cannot wait to see what goes down in that final season. Overall, I'm going to give Better Call Saul season 5 a 5 out of 5. On April 22nd, I watched Erin Brockovich, the Julia Roberts film, the one that she won the Oscar for Best Actress for, and I loved this film, like really did. I'm all for films about fighting the man, especially the corporate man, and I just love stories about getting justice for people who have been wronged, and this, in that regard, is one of the best films that I've seen of that category, because Erin Brockovich is fighting against this water company that's been polluting the water, and people have been getting sick from it, and they've been lying about it, so of course justice needs to be served from that. And it was extremely engaging, very involving. Erin Brockovich herself was a very compelling character. I really cared about her. Julia Roberts was amazing in the film. Yeah, it was a great legal drama. Some funny stuff in there as well. Some good banter between her and Albert Finney's character. Only issue I had with it was a tad long, and I kind of felt it a little bit in the runtime. But overall, I was surprised at how much I loved Erin Brockovich, and I would highly recommend it if you like those fight the man kind of films. So yeah, I'm going to give Erin Brockovich a 4.5 out of 5. On April 23rd, I watched Insidious, the James Wan horror film from 2011, I believe. And just like with The Conjuring, James Wan takes a pretty basic, kind of familiar horror premise and horror characters, but elevates it with chilling atmosphere, expertly built suspense, and some actual genuinely effective jump scares. That's the thing with Insidious. All the jump scares in this film are accompanied by a terrifying visual, and I don't mind those kind of jump scares because yes, you react to the loud noise, but accompany that with the terrifying image of a demon or a ghost, then it's like extra effective. Jump scares where it's just somebody going through a corridor who then just gets startled by a cat, or the person who just jumps out the end of the corridor going, hey, I got the beer. That stuff is BS. I hate that. That's just literally loud noise getting you to react, instinctively to it. I hate that stuff. But given the terrifying visuals, the terrifying imagery, then I'm all for that, because it actually creeps me the hell out. And that's exactly what Insidious is. Some of the visuals and some of the creepy stuff you see in this film are just like, holy crap. Like the whole tiptoe through the tulips bit with the little kid dancing to it. And obviously the whole Darth Maul looking demon guy, it was a little bit over the top, but still he was a creepy looking human being, demon. So yeah, in a world where 90-95% of horror films are terrible and not creepy or scary at all, Insidious is actually one of the genuinely good and creepy ones out there. I liked it very much, so I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. The next day, on the 24th of April, I watched Insidious Chapter 2. Now this one's a bit of a shame really, because I actually liked the story they were trying to tell with this one, because it's a bit of a different spin on the first one, where somebody's astral form is trapped in the further and they have to go and rescue them from the further, but the spin on this one being that it's the dad who's trapped and his body has actually been possessed by the demon and it's wreaking havoc in the real world, so it's a bit more of a race against time in that aspect. I liked that, and I liked the performances that went along with it. It's just what was lacking from this one for me was pretty much all the effectiveness of the first one. It just didn't have that same, expertly built suspense. The tension wasn't really all there, and I didn't find it to be as chilling as the first one. Couple of really good scares, I will say that, and that's the kind of recurring theme for the Insidious films, where there were a couple of good scares, but the rest of it, and I just found Insidious Chapter 2 kind of underwhelming. It didn't fall flat on its face, so I didn't hate it or anything like that. It was just an unfortunate case of sequelitis for me, so I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. And the day after that, on April 25th, I watched, you guessed it, Insidious Chapter 3. And just as I said a second ago, with the recurring theme of the Insidious films being a couple of good scares, but the rest of the film, meh, that's exactly the case with Chapter 3. I didn't really care for this film. Again, a couple of really good jump scares with some creepy imagery, but it's just, it didn't have, compelling characters, good acting, or any of the chillingness of the first film to really back it up. So I was more disappointed with this one than I was with Chapter 2, because Chapter 2 had more going for it story-wise, whereas this one, you could kind of tell this is a part where, they're starting to run out of ideas and they're starting to have the franchise run its course. And that always happens with horror franchises that start out with a cheap one, they made a lot of money, so they make more of them, and they just get lazier and worse the more they go on. And Chapter 3 was pretty much the beginning of the end for Insidious for me, so I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. And then the day after that, on April 26th, yes, you guessed, I watched Insidious The Last Key, because me and my friend did an Insidious binge for no obvious reason, because we just wanted something to watch, and all 4 Insidious films are on Netflix, so we're just like, okay, let's do it. Plus we have fun watching horror films, jump scares and whatnot. And The Last Key is definitely the worst one of the Insidious films, and like I said about Chapter 3 and Chapter 2, couple of good scares but nothing much else. But with The Last Key though, there was not that many scares that I can remember. I can think of 2 really good ones off the top of my head. I guess that just proves how forgettable the film is. And sort of like Chapter 2, there is a story here that could be interesting, but they just don't approach it in an interesting or compelling way. And some of the acting, again, was pretty rubbish, and the chills just wasn't there. And like I said, it's a horror franchise that just ran its course. They milked it into the ground. They ran it dry. We've seen it 100 times before, and we're probably going to see it 100 more times in the not too distant future. So Insidious The Last Key, it's a 2 out of 5 from me. On April 27th, I watched 71, the Jack O'Connell film that came out in 2014-15, whenever it was. And I've wanted to watch this film for quite a while, actually, because there were parts of this film that were filmed not just in my hometown, but literally minutes away from my old street. It's actually the big riot scene towards the beginning where it all kicks off and where the guy gets left behind. That was filmed a 2-minute walk away from my old street and my old house. So seeing my old local area where I partially grew up in a proper film was just so surreal to me. The film itself, it was actually really good. It was a really intense, really gripping, riveting film. Jack O'Connell's left by himself accidentally. He's behind enemy lines. He's constantly surrounded by danger. He's in the 1970s in Belfast, Protestants and Catholics are at each other's throats, really violently. And it was really intense. And there's nothing much more to it than he's trapped in the lion's den and he's got to survive and get back to his barracks. but it's just the execution was really good. It was a really intense, really gripping film, like I already said, and I quite enjoyed it. If you can watch it, I obviously recommend watching it. It's on Amazon Prime Video in the UK, so UK people, get it watched and see my hometown in the early parts of the film. I'm going to give 71 a 4 out of 5. Also on the 27th of April, I watched Extraction, the new Chris Hemsworth film on Netflix. I did not see a trailer for this film. I did not follow the release of this film because straight to Netflix films is a risky business for me because a lot of them I find are quite rubbish, with the exceptions like your Irishmans and stuff like that. But me and my friend watched this film because we just wanted a fun action thing to kick back and watch and hopefully enjoy. And I gotta say, I enjoyed this film more than I thought I would because there are some kills in here that are just insanely badass. And I'm talking like, you know when something's so cool and so badass that you actually start laughing because of how unexpectedly awesome it was? Me and my friend did that numerous times throughout this film. You know, there's one kill in the fight, the first big fight scene where he kicks a table into somebody's face and it like kind of crushes his face. It was it was beautiful. There was some beautiful deaths in Extraction, which makes me sound like a sick bastard. And yeah, I've seen all the criticisms from people saying the violence was too extreme, it was too excessive, it was aimless or whatever, and I can sort of see what they're saying, but at the end of the day, I just want a fun action film, and this film gave it to me. Yeah, the story and the characters were pretty by the numbers, and I didn't really care about the story and the characters, but you know, in the third act, when, you know, it's all coming to a head, it's the big climax, the guns are shooting, bullets are flying, bodies are dropping, I came to the realization that I actually didn't really care that the story and the characters were kind of meh. I mean, it's still a negative on the film, obviously, but I was just having so much fun watching the damn thing that I just didn't care, because I feel like that was the film's intention, was to be a badass action film with some kick-ass action scenes. Like, the choreography and the stunt work is actually quite impressive in some parts. And there's this one big action sequence, it's like a big unbroken take. Well, it's filmed to look like one take. You can definitely tell where the fake transitions are and stuff. But it was still really cool, and Chris Hemsworth was quite good in the film. His character was just a kick-ass, badass man who was just really brilliant at killing people in really awesome, badass, glorious ways. The film did exactly what it said on the tin for me. And I think with what's going on in the world right now with the whole lockdown stuff, I think this was the perfect time for a film like this to come out, because it's the kind of film that exists purely for when you're like stuck inside and you can't go outside, like a rainy day kind of action film, you know? You're stuck indoors and you want to watch just a really kick-ass action film. This film was like made for that. I'm probably never going to watch it again, but I'm glad I watched it because I had a good time with it, and I'm probably going to go back and scroll through the film and look at some of those badass kills again, because seriously, you got to just watch, if you don't even watch the film, just watch clips of it to see those just awesome deaths. And because of those badass deaths, I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5 for Extraction. On the 28th of April, I watched The Curious Case of Benjamin Button for the first time. And I'm really starting to like films like this, where it follows one character and the film is pretty much about their life and seeing the people he or she meets and the events that the person witnesses and how that shapes them as a person. And Forrest Gump is another amazing example of this. I adore that film. And there are some similarities between Forrest Gump and Benjamin Button, but I don't consider Benjamin Button a Forrest Gump ripoff. In fact, I really liked The Curious Case of Benjamin Button a lot because, again, I like films about people living lives as long as it's interesting. And this film added a unique twist to it because, of course, he ages backwards, and seeing how that affects people perceiving him in his early life and then, you know, leading into his later life where he grows younger as he ages. And the romance between him and Cate Blanchett's character I thought was really sweet and really heartfelt, and the entire film was very melancholic. The way that it executes the emotion and just the overall feel of the film. It never tries to pound the emotion into you. It never feels like it's trying to make it too overly dramatic with the musical score. It just feels very calm, and it just lets the characters and the overall feel of the story just speak for itself, and I really appreciated that. And the third act was, I had the lump in the throat, I was almost tearing up. It was just really great, emotionless. Did I really just say emotionless? Whatever. I'm going to give The Curious Case of Benjamin Button a 4.5 out of 5. Later that night, me and my friend did a double feature on Netflix. The first film we watched was Breaking In, a film from 2018 starring people, I guess. And I will give this film props for one thing. It was a bit of a different spin on the home invasion formula, because the mother is locked outside of the house and the home invaders, the bad guys, are inside the house with the mum's kids as the bait to lead her back to the house, and she has to find a way to get back into the house. So props for changing up the formula. But what's bad about the film? Pretty much everything else. The dialogue is cringy, the characters were generic, the acting was bad, and the film was just generally quite boring, and it feels like a lot of it was quite stretched out to fit a serviceable cinematic runtime. It's like an hour and 27 minutes long, but the opening scene is like all in slow motion, and it's when the film was fading to black from the typical cliched zoom out shot from the house, which my friend completely predicted seconds before it happened. That's how predictable the film is. And it fades out, and it just takes forever for the music to finally die down and the credits to roll. It's like, you're really desperate to make this a cinematic runtime, aren't you? Anyway, breaking in, whatever, disposable home invasion film. Props for the different spin on the formula, but that's not enough to make the film good. So yeah, it's a 1.5 out of 5. And then after breaking in, we watched Geostorm. Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of things about this film since it came out in 2017. And yeah, it was pretty much everything I heard it was. It is stupid, it is nonsense, it is drivel, it is... I'm not going to try to waste too much time talking about everything wrong with Geostorm because I'm going to be here forever, but let's just say that everything that happens in this film, like every major development of the film, I predicted. I predicted who the bad guy was the second he started speaking, because he just had that tone about him. The film is just full of horrendous dialogue, cliched character moments, terrible CGI, and moments of just hilarious, stupid implausibility that I just couldn't help but laugh at. And that is the one redeeming element of Geostorm, is that it is so stupid and so ridiculous that it's fun to laugh at. And that's pretty much the main reason why we watched it, is to just laugh at how dumb it was. So I guess the film did its job, kind of. It's not going to stop me from saying the film's terrible, and then it gets a 1 out of 5 though. On April 29th, I did a rewatch of Knives Out on Blu-ray, and this was the first time I had seen the film since seeing it in the cinema, and I gotta say, I was extremely surprised at how engaged and intrigued I was into the plot of the film, even though I knew the outcome of the story. I knew what the resolution of it was. I was expecting it to go down the usual route of murder mysteries, whodunits, and mystery films in general, where because you know what's going to happen at the end, it's not going to be as interesting the second time round, but that completely was not the case with Knives Out, like at all. In fact, I noticed a couple of more little details in some of the dialogue and some of the bits of information you get told on the second time round. And yeah, I gotta say, this is definitely the best murder mystery whodunit film that I've ever seen, because the fact that I was that engaged with it on the second time round, I mean, murder mysteries and whodunits aren't usually this rewatchable, and they don't usually get that much better, at least in my experience. But Knives Out definitely got better on the rewatch, and I loved it back in the cinema. And I originally gave it a 4.5 out of 5 in my original video, but now, honestly, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. Straight after Knives Out, I rewatched Ford v Ferrari, also on Blu-ray, and this was also the first time I'd seen it since the cinema, and also, just like Knives Out, I liked this film even more the second time round, and also, I loved it the first time round. This film is just an amazing package of awesomeness. It's got great characters played by great actors. It's a rousing sports drama that gets your blood pumping for the main characters. You're rooting for them to fight the odds, you know, from the corporate douchebags who are trying to stick their nasty little fingers in there with the, you know, interference and whatnot. The race sequences are awesome, and it's also a good story of unlikely friendship between, you know, Ken Miles and Carol Shelby. It's a great package of greatness. I really, really love this film. And just like with Knives Out, I'm bumping this film from a 4.5 out of 5 to a 5 out of 5. And lastly, on the 29th of April, I watched a film called The Kings of Summer. It came out back in 2013, and it's about 3 friends who run away from home because they don't like their home lives and their parents and whatnot, and they build a house in the woods and they live in the woods. And the premise is what sold me on it, because I never saw a trailer for it. I just saw it on Amazon Prime, read the premise, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like a fun kind of almost Stand By Me-ish kind of premise, with friends doing their own thing away from the parents. So I was kind of excited for it. But I gotta say, it was disappointing for me. I enjoyed the friendship aspect of it, and I liked the whole friends living in the woods kind of thing. But what really bogged this film down for me was the hit and miss humour. It kind of made the tone feel a little bit all over the place sometimes. I appreciated it tries to be quirky and kind of off kilter and not like a sticking to one conventional tone, but some of the humour I just found really cheesy and kind of corny, especially with the third friend whose name I can't remember, the weird kid. I just found him a little bit overboard in terms of his weirdness. But my biggest problem with the film is where the story went. As you would expect with a film like this, the friends eventually start kind of arguing and there's a bit of conflict between them. And the reason for the conflict between two of the friends in this film is over a girl. At that point, honestly, I just kind of checked out from the film because I just didn't find it enjoyable anymore. The first 2/3 of it were kind of enjoyable, minus the hit and miss humour. But once the love triangle, teen romance crap came into it, it just kind of then slipped into the territory that most like teen coming of age films usually fall into. And at that point, it just didn't really feel different anymore, and again, it just wasn't fun anymore. I'll give Kings of Summer a 2.5 out of 5. On April 30th, I watched A History of Violence, the Viggo Mortensen film from 2005. I think I need to check out more of these small town drama thriller kind of films, because when they're good, and A History of Violence wasn't just good, it was actually great. The thing that really drove this film for me was the premise. Viggo Mortensen is this average guy who owns a diner, and he prevents two guys from robbing the diner in suspiciously violent ways, and then a few days later, Ed Harris rocks up and says, hey, you're that guy from back in the day who did something wrong to me, and you owe me. And Viggo Mortensen's like, no, I'm not that guy, I'm Tom Stall, I'm not who you're looking for. And it was the intrigue of, is Viggo Mortensen actually the guy who Ed Harris says he is, who did something wrong to him back in the day, or is it just a unsettling case of mistaken identity? And seeing Ed Harris and his goons following Viggo Mortensen and his family, stalking them and whatnot, it led to some really intense confrontations and just an overall really interesting and compelling story. And the directions the story goes in, which I'm not going to spoil in case you haven't seen it, it was quite compelling, and it explores the emotional consequences of violence. You know, Viggo Mortensen's family starts viewing him in a different way after the whole robbery incident happens, and other things that happen in the film, which again I'm not going to spoil. And it makes you reflect and think about violence in the world today and what it means and how people use it. And it ties into the overall multiple meanings of the History of Violence title. This was a really good film, really great small town drama, really interesting story, great acting. Viggo Mortensen once again just kills it. I highly recommend checking it out. I'm going to give A History of Violence a 4.5 out of 5. And lastly, on April 30th, and the final film that I watched in April, was Four Lions, a British film about four wannabe terrorists who are putting together a plan to commit a bombing. This film is hysterical. The thing that makes this film funny for me is the dialogue between the characters. The back and forth is really funny, the bickering, the arguing, the comedic timing from everybody is just completely on point, and some of the references they make to like British pop culture in the dialogue between them and in the bickering was just brilliant. But it's not like an overly provocative film. It doesn't go for like cheap dirty jokes or anything like that, and it doesn't try and make jokes at the expense of like Muslims and whatnot. It's not a piss take on any of that stuff. It's just four people, three of them are Muslims, one of them is a British Muslim, who just want to be part of the jihad or whatever it is, and they're just buffoons and they just keep messing it up, and they're all just clowning around trying to do stuff, but because they're buffoons they keep messing it up, and it's very, very funny and quite shocking in some scenes. The sheep, that's all I'm gonna say. If you haven't seen the film, just watch out for the sheep scene. But I also liked how two of the main characters actually had a bit of heart to them, because there's a couple of times where they're like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to go through with this bombing? Do I really believe what I'm actually supposedly believing by going out and doing this bombing and the message that I'm trying to spread? I like that. It wasn't just a cut and dry comedy of just four buffoons trying to be bombers, but it's still a hilarious time. If you've never seen it, I don't know how people outside of the UK are going to respond to it, because there is a lot of British type humour in the film, like British references to pop culture in the UK, so I'm afraid this one's strictly for the British, I think. I mean, who knows, I've heard American people say they enjoy British comedy, so whatever, just check it out. It's a great time, it's really funny. Four Lions gets a 4 out of 5 from me. Holy crap, this video is long. If you've stuck around to the end, thanks so much. It's not often people watch all my videos in their entirety, but if you've stuck around to this point, thanks so much, seriously. How was your month? How was your April 2020? What's the best or worst films you saw this month? What are some first time watches you watched? And just tell me all of your film, TV, video game habits of April 2020 in the comments below. And if you want to see more of my stuff, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you when I see you.